Welcome to the Chris Lieck Studio Podcast, featuring unique stories from the visionaries that built this industry, as well as new and up-and-coming artists. Discover their stories as told by the pioneers that molded this amazing business. And now your host, Chris Lieck.
Today on the show, we have an extremely special guest, Sam Kindrick. Sam's the owner of Action Magazine, and he's an author. He just wrote a book called Outlaw Country Reporter. I picked it up and read it. It's amazing. Sam is an icon in Texas, from the stories of the Wille Nelson picnic to his characters that he's written about in this book. It's an amazing book, and I welcome him on the show. He wrote an article on my band when we sold out the Broadway Theater. It was an incredible article. He also knew my father, so it's a very personal guest for me and a legend, Sam Kindrick. I want to start, and I want to jog your memory a little bit about, or jolt your memory. It's Sul Ross, it's 1955, and you meet Elvis Presley in a restaurant across from the college.
That's correct.
And so you just see him in the restaurant?
I did.
And what? So you go up and you say hi. How did the introduction happen?
I don't remember. I just told Presley who I was, and that I would see him that night, I believe, and
high school gym.
At the high school gym. And I had just met my wife to be, and she was there. She came to that show.
That's incredible. And how was the show? You said he kind of wore white T-shirts and stuff like that. He was wearing white T-shirts and everything, just kind of was before the Flash, right?
Yeah, he just had on jeans and a white T-shirt and tennis shoes, at best I remember.
What was his popularity like then, Sam? Was he real popular or just starting to get on a roll?
Do what now?
Presley, was he pretty popular or just starting to really become?
He was just getting started. We were listening to him on the Louisiana Hayride. And
oh, wow.
That's how far back it was. And within a year, he had women jumping out of the balcony in San Antonio.
So it's 55. You're at Sul Ross. Giants being filmed in Marfa with James Dean, one of my favorite all-time movies.
Right. It was being filmed in Marfa, and actually, I was working managing a swimming pool at Sul Ross, and some of the stars were coming over there. James Dean was there, and
good God,
Liz Taylor came over there, and so all the rubberneckers from Alpine were up there standing around the fence checking out the movie stars.
and was Dean was at the pool?
I think James Dean was at there. I can swear to that.
Yeah. And so
everybody was zeroed in on Liz.
Right, because she was there.
Yeah,
that's right. She was at the pool. Classic stuff.
Did you make it
a handmaiden or a helper with her that she was as good looking as Taylor?
Wow.
Yeah.
And Liz is beautiful, isn't she?
Right.
Did you make it to Marathon at all to watch any of the filming?
No.
So that is an incredible start. You come from Junction. You're at college at Sul Ross, and then I'm not trying to lead the conversation. I'm just trying to get into the subject. So I don't want to do all the talking, but I'm gonna try my best. You then end up at Texas State to study journalism.
I did. I spent 2 years at Sul Ross, and I was writing themes for guys for money. And the head of the English department called me in and told me that I needed to go to journalism school.
Sam, what was your major before that? Before he sent you to journalism school, what were you studying?
I didn't have a major.
Undeclared, undecided.
I said sports. What do you call it? I'm not.
Sports medicine?
Physical ed?
PE?
Physical ed, yeah. That's
physical ed.
Right.
And so you're let's jump now. You get a journalism degree. You end up at 1960 at the San Antonio Express.
Right.
And your job there writing just basically covered everything, correct?
It was called general assignment, right. They would send me out on stuff. I didn't have a beat. They put me on the courthouse temporarily.
They did.
When somebody else was on vacation. And that's where I made friends with people like your father.
I know. And And so you're covering all these subjects. Now so at that point, did you have your first child? At say 1960, 58, 55, and 58, right?
I had my first child was born in Bay City, where I worked for about a month when I got out of college.
Okay. And so when you get to the San Antonio Express, your second child during that time is born, correct? Or was he born 58?
I went first to the San Angelo Standard Time.
That's right, you did.
And then I came to the Express News. I was hired on the telephone.
I know, that's great.
Yeah.
What was your relationship in those days with Express News? Did you enjoy it? Was it a good paper?
Well, yeah, it was a lot of fun right at first. It was like the big time.
Was the courthouse exciting during those first assignments you had in there?
All of that was exciting. I was meeting people like Judge Hippo Garcia. He was just a lawyer in those days, and Charlie Lieck, your father.
He was a district attorney.
He was a district attorney, and he had lost his voice
in a car wreck.
Yeah, and he always thought that hampered him so bad that it ruined his career, and it didn't.
Did you ever meet some of the colorful ones like T.P. Henley?
T.P. Henley was one of my favorite people.
Can you tell us a little bit about him? They say he fired a gun off in the courtroom one time.
I don't doubt that at all.
He had a glass eye?
He had a glass eye, and he would roll it in the court.
Didn't he? Somebody said he took it out one time and tried to hex a jury with it.
I don't think that was Henley's eye. I think he just carried it in his shirt pocket.
Carried an extra one.
And rolled it at people when they were trying to be talking in a courtroom.
Did you come across the likes of Freddie Saman? Can you tell us a little bit about his character?
Freddie Saman liked me, and he told me that if I drop out of the journalism business and go to law school, he'd put me to work in his office.
I got you. So a lot of those old timers you met, Mike Rizek, all those old kind of guys that were just hustling around trying to make a living.
That's right.
Did you have any favorites besides Henley?
Charlie Lieck was one of my favorites,
yeah.
The best friends that I had in those days. And
yeah, he liked you a lot.
I looked up to Charlie, and we did a lot of beer drinking together.
You sure did.
Can you tell my brother and I a little bit about the TV days, how Charlie used TV to win that election? You had called it the first time television was ever used in an election with Pat Boyette, I believe, was his producer.
Charlie won that election before he and I became friends. That was right before my advent on the scene.
And during those days in the 60s, you started writing about some musical artists, correct? You started covering some music topics for the Express.
Yeah, that's right.
I
just wrote a general column when I started doing the column. After doing general assignments for about a year or so.
So you're writing, and let's talk about that. You're at the Express News, and when did you start writing a lot about music? Was it right away? Did you go to the editor and say, I need to cover more music? How did it get into the music scene with Willie and all of that? How did it morph in from a general reporter to actually covering Willie or just the people that you covered?
Well, I look for characters, and I'm not a music writer. I never was a music writer. I don't claim to be a music writer, but I wrote about musicians and some of the more colorful musicians. But to the end of my career, when I was doing the magazine, I had the music magazine. I did not call it a music magazine. It was called Action Magazine, and basically we covered the action, and it didn't matter what it was. And a lot of those musicians just happened to be the colorful people that I was attracted to. And Willie was one of the very first ones. And I met Willie at John T. Floor's country store. We were sitting out there under a mesquite tree smoking weed. And that's where I was introduced to Willie. I think Larry Trader was there. He was a character that followed Willie around. And he introduced me to Nelson at that time. And Willie said, you want some weed? And I hit on the thing. I'd do anything, that was available. But As it turned out, methamphetamine and speed turned out to be my favorite further down the line, but that's another story.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Trader brothers? Because a lot of people have never heard about them, these generations. They were quite a colorful family, weren't they?
Bobby, the younger brother, was a lawyer and an accomplished golfer. He was at the University of Houston, and I don't know, he could have gone. I don't know, he might have been on the tour. Larry was a character and a former police character, and he had a lot of talent. Also, he could play golf. He could do a lot of stuff. But somehow or another, he became a part of the Nelson crew, and so he was booking Willie, and he was kind of a gopher for Willie around San Antonio.
And what are the other brothers? You had another brother or two. Weren't there 4 of them?
Yeah, I think so, but the only one I remember is Bobby.
Bobby, okay.
And during this time, you forged a friendship with Willie.
Right.
And that friendship lasted so many years. In the book, you cover it. And so in the middle of the 60s, you're at the Express and News, and there's Dan Cook there. Oh, God, he's a classic sports. Right. And Dan Cook was the best. One of your drinking buddies, right?
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit
about
Dan?
He's a legend, Dan Cook. People don't know Dan Cook.
He coined the phrase, "It ain't over till the fat ladies sing," right, Sam?
They give him that credit, but that's not.
Not accurate. I figured.
It's inaccurate.
Can you tell us about your relationship with Dan and when you first met him, what he was like, what those times were like?
Oh yeah, we went out drinking together all the time, and we were friends. And Dan was a great writer.
He was,
and I looked to him for that, and I was trying to remember who coined that phrase, but I believe it was the baseball guy.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was somebody in baseball.
Yeah,
you're right. Now, during this time, you get sent out to do a hurricane in Brownsville.
That was one of the first stories that I covered.
And that was a massive hurricane.
Beulah was the biggest and the baddest one that had ever hit the Gulf Coast at the time.
And you go out there with the photographer, and Gil Barrera ends up in your car, a famous photographer for an opponent, which is the San Antonio Light.
That's correct. Gil was one of the greatest photographers that ever lived.
He was. He is incredible.
He did our pictures.
He did my baby picture. It's still on my wall, 1963.
He was great with trick stuff. He did a lot of trick stuff. The photographer that I was riding with that morning was Jose Barrera, who's not any kin no relation to
Gil.
But we were riding in one car, and Gil was down there in another car for the San Antonio Light. And somehow or another, his car got damaged where he couldn't drive it that morning. We went out after the hurricane hit the night before. Then we creeped out in the morning, and Gil didn't have a car by that time, so he asked if he could ride with us, and said sure. We were friends with the Light people.
Yeah. But the story is just fantastic for all you guys that haven't read the book. I don't want to give it away, but the story of Gil taking a photo that comes out in the San Antonio Light, as opposed to the photographer with you, who takes all the mass destruction, right. And he takes one of 2 dogs. Right? There was a dog hugging something. What was it?
No, it was a Chihuahua dog and a rat. And they were huddled together under this sign.
And Gil takes this photo.
He said, "Do you mind stopping the car a minute? I want to get it. It's still pouring down rain." And I said, yeah. Joe was driving the car. I said, "Stop the car, Joe." And Gil put this raincoat over his head and took his speed graphic camera and went out there into the storm where the sign was bent down. It said Port Lavaca so many miles. I don't remember what it said. Anyway, I knew he was doing something to kill us. And I told Joe, I said, "Go out there and find out what Gil's doing out there with that sign." He said, "Oh, he's taking a picture of that sign." I said, "No, he ain't taking a picture of that sign. There's something else going on out there." And we didn't find out till the next morning. Somehow they got the film back to the Light, and they put it 6 columns. It was a giant picture of a Chihuahua dog and a rat huddled together. And I believe the caption was, friends in the sun, in the face of a storm or something.
Friends in the face of a storm, and that is such a classic story.
Gil had all these pictures. I mean, Joe had all these pictures of buildings ripped apart and everything. And the lad had that picture of the rat and the chihuahua and just killed us. I said, we're dead.
Now we're going to go to, I want to make sure that I cover everything because I read it last night and I was just mesmerized by the book. So we talk about Red Smith, this cowboy that you grew up with. It's incredible. I mean, this guy is just, I mean, every character in the book is just classic. You could have a almost small book about each one of them, literally, when you think about it. The Madam, Red, and that guy was a true cowboy.
Yeah, he was a real cowboy.
You say he's riding in a parade with the bone sticking out of his leg.
Yeah, he got in that Junction parade, and he was always working with horses. Every horse that he was on was a colt. They were a lot skitterish and held. So the colt slipped out from under him and fell and broke his leg. And the bone was actually protruding out of his leg. And everybody gathered around, and he said, "Don't cut the pant sleeve off my leg." He said, "I'm going to finish riding in the parade." He said, "I've never been able to ride in the parade. This is the first chance I've ever had, and I'm going to finish the ride." And
he did.
And he did.
And this is the greatest story, is that guy rode a horse from where he lived to you at Sol Ross, slept in your car, and then he wants to go and get a job on the Giant set.
He did.
Which he did.
He did.
He rides a horse. Then he rides a horse to San Antonio.
Right.
In the middle of the streets.
I mean, he did that numerous times. Sometimes he came to visit me in San Antonio, and he showed up at my mother's house, and he'd hobble the horse out in the yard. Or
that is just absolutely incredible.
I saw Red actually get that blue horse to jump up in the back of a pickup truck. Just climbed up in there. He could do anything with that horse, but it was like a trained dog.
So a real cowboy.
Yeah.
100%.
Right.
That you don't get stories like that talking about that. Now
when they pulled his teeth, old Dr. Smith in downtown Junction pulled his teeth. He pulled lowers one day and the uppers the next day, and everybody in town gathered around because it was right up above the pool hall to watch it. And Red said, "I'm ready." So no Novocaine, no nothing. Dr. Smith
my
didn't use Novocaine.
God.
They pulled all of his teeth with no Novocaine, and that was a big show. Everybody in town went down to watch it.
You just can't make that stuff up.
No.
He's getting his teeth pulled with no Novocaine, and everyone shows up to see it.
Yeah, everybody from the pool hall for sure. All the domino players went up to watch.
I mean, how do you match something like that? That's incredible. Now, let's go to the Willie picnic. So it's 70. We're going to jump around a little bit, and I'm going to jolt your memory. Okay. It's 73. How does the picnic come about with Willie? The first famous, infamous picnic of Willie Nelson's 4th of July picnic. And the first one was in Dripping Springs, correct?
Right.
And how does that event happen?
How did it formulate?
How did it formulate?
I don't know who put it together. I guess Willie did. I really don't know.
Can you tell us a little bit about the...
I just know Willie told me we're getting ready to have a show, and it's going to be at Dripping Springs, and here's where you go to get to it. And he didn't tell me that first night, but right before the show came down, he told me Leon's going to be there.
Leon Russell
was going to show up,
and he was huge at the time.
Leon was way bigger than Willie.
Oh,
they
God!
were friends from before that. So,
and your son loved Leon.
My son worshipped him. My older son, yeah.
Yes, and so this event happens in Dripping Springs, and how many people show up? And tell us a little about this event. What you remember about it?
Gosh, I can't remember how many people showed up.
You think you said 40,000?
40 or 50,000, right? It was huge, for biggest crowd I ever saw.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Can you walk us through you walking in, what you remember about the event, the stage, what you did during it, some of the highlights?
I remember when we got there, I had both my sons with me, and I was driving an old Chevrolet pickup truck, and we got on the grounds, and I saw some guys sitting around a campfire. It was still light, but they'd jacked up a campfire, and they were playing the guitar, and one of them had his back to us and had the long blonde hair, and I knew it was Leon Russell at the time, but I had never met Leon up to that point. And so what happened, Willie introduced me to Leon, and my son was, by that time, he couldn't talk. It was blowing his mind.
Yeah.
And here was Leon Russell, and so Willie introduced Grady to Leon, my son. He said, "This is Leon Russell," and Leon says, "Mighty nice to meet you." And the kid couldn't even talk. He was frozen. He said, "I hope you enjoy the show tomorrow." That was the night before the show. But that did it, and that made a fan. My kid became a Wille Nelson fan at the same time.
That's right.
He thought this was a bunch of country bullshit, but here the greatest rocker in the world was out there with Wille Nelson, so that did it. It was very exciting. And the night before that thing, there was electricity in the air. You could see it. There was, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
The next day, we had all the bare boobs, and the whole bit was coming together out there. And
that's just
history was made. That's when the hippies smoked dope with the rednecks. And
I love that line in the book, when the hippies smoked dope with the rednecks.
Right. Everybody was friends.
Man, what a time. That's 73. And that event, questions that you have about
Well, it was a one-day show, Sam? Only one day back
Right.
then? What time did it end? Did Willie go on last? Did he let
man.
other musicians mix in with him? Was it a jam?
Daylight the next day, probably.
Really?
Yeah, Johnny Bush was on the thing, and I don't know. I think Christopherson was there.
God.
There were monster stars there before they were monster stars. So it was just loaded with big time entertainment. I think Rita Coolidge, just go on and on. I don't think Joplin was on it. No, she didn't make that one.
She had died, I think, right?
I think
71. So. She died.
Yeah,
right.
I think so.
So it was. So we had all these future up and coming stars, and really at the time, was Willie big then? Had he grown to that kind of proportion, or was it like Leon and these other people were much bigger than Willie?
Well, yeah, Leon. The whole deal was Willie used Leon to promote this thing.
To get the draw.
Yeah. Well, no, they didn't know at the time that Leon was going to be on it. That's the truth.
Oh, really?
But after that, the picnics got bigger and bigger.
Then it started to get big, and they went from different cities, correct? They went Dripping Springs,
around,
Houston,
right.
A&M.
Even went out of state with it. I kind of lost interest in it myself after a couple of years.
But you had some good times there, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Were you officially covering it, Sam, for the Express News?
No, I was doing my Action magazine thing. I just started the magazine.
Okay.
Wow.
Express News and I had just parted company shortly before that.
That's right. And the story is, and I want to get into the Action magazine story where you talk to the, I guess it's the CEO or the head honcho at Lone Star, with never even having a print magazine exist yet. And he agrees to give you $1,000 for the back cover to start the magazine, basically, correct?
That's correct. Harry Jersey.
Yeah, I figured that's who it was.
Harry Jersey, I suspect he probably didn't have any use for the Express News. And I'd been fired from the Express News, and so I approached Harry, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to put together a music magazine or an entertainment magazine. And I said I would be writing about people like Wille Nelson and Ray Wally Hubbard and some of those up-and-comers in those days. That's when Lone Star was pushing the progressive country music, the redneck rock thing that was a phenomenon that was taking place in those days. And so it tied in with what Jersey wanted to do, and I told him I would be writing about all these people that I knew, all these guys. I'd be writing about people like Ray Wally Hubbard and Billy Joe Shaver and just on down the line. And Jersey liked the idea. And Jersey's right-hand man at that time was Jerry Retzloff. And Jerry was kind of the on-the-scene guy that coordinated a lot of these Lone Star promoted shows. So fit right in, and so I didn't have any money. So Jersey wrote me a check for $1,000, and said,
which helped you get it printed, correct?
Right. I didn't. So I went to Joe Medellin down at San Antonio Press, which when San Antonio Press was over on Fredericksburg Road. Told Joe what I wanted to do, and so that's what got us going through those early months. And
you started in color, and then Willie told you to keep it simple,
right?
To go to black and white.
He said, "Do black and white. It appeals to poor people. don't do the color stuff at first." So I had color on the logo. I had pure red on the logo, and that's all I had. No color separations and none of that high dollar stuff,
So the first couple of issues were kind of lean, right? You had to really hand to mouth.
There were 16 pages, and the very first press run, I pulled up in front of the Express News and threw a bundle of them in the front door.
I love that story.
So here you are, Charlie.
That's something like Charlie Lieck would do, my dad.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same kind of mentality.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about you have a hilarious story about driving Don Meredith around at the World's Fair.
Yeah.
The Cowboys quarterback.
Right.
Who said, put y'all's arms together and realize, what the hell am I doing in the NFL?
Right.
And your love of, how was your view of the 1968 World's Fair? Like, what did you think about it at the time? Like, this is a big event. I love the story where they fly you to Canada pre the fair, correct? Yeah. In the book, you got to read that story.
You got to read the book.
You got to read the book.
It was just magic. Stuff was happening that I didn't even know how to appreciate at the time.
Because you're young and you're thinking, well, this is going to last forever.
Here's Meredith, and he said, I'm out there with people like Dick Butkus and animals like that killing me. Look at my arm. My arm's not any bigger than yours. Of course it was, but I really took to Meredith.
And he's just a cool guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Did y'all keep up your friendship?
No, I didn't see him again after the fair.
But you're a Cowboys lover, so it's cool having Don Meredith in a golf cart driving around the World's Fair.
Yeah. Well, that was my weekend job, was driving different people around in a golf cart. Meredith was one of the people, and so I really took to Meredith. At the time, of course, I was a Dallas Cowboys fan too.
Exactly.
And you're talking about driving around Hemisphere 68 around the fair.
Right.
Who were some of the other people you remember you drove around?
I can't remember one of them.
Not one of them? Okay.
But now I want to go to hilarious. You create this Menudo cook-off in 73. You have a boxing match with Alan Brown and Roy Aguilar.
Right.
Alan's a lawyer.
Right.
He was your lawyer when you ended up going to jail, right?
He was my freebie lawyer that came help me, yeah.
And Alan Brown's pretty big at the time.
Was big.
And he gets, so in this Menudo cook-off, you throw this event. Tell us how this came about. You did this yourself.
Yeah, that had all these chili cook-offs going on, and so I decided to, I don't know what gave me the idea, but the San Antonio stew is menudo, which is made out of tripe, which comes from a cow's belly, and it appealed to me, and so I thought, well, maybe we can just do a menudo cook-off and have, trophies or something to that effect. I don't know what we did, but seemed like in San Antonio it got caught on, and I was doing the daily column for the Express News then, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then everybody wanted to get in on and so everybody was sending in their names and stuff. So we had the thing, and we had all these menudo cooks, and the entertainment on the side was Wille Nelson, and we had about 20 other bands, or 25 or 30 bands, I don't remember how many. And Willie was the headliner, and then we had Roy Aguilar and Alan Brown in a boxing match on the side.
Wrap up.
Well, Alan was Golden Gloves growing up,
and that's when T. Brown showed up with this giant Winnebago with a sign on it that said "Hot Pants Menudo." T, of course, was a local madam, and
she was the local madam.
And I thought she was going to bomb the whole thing. She was a friend of mine. I got her one side. I said, "T, you're going to kill me. What are you doing out here bringing all you girls out here and shit?" And she said, He said, Sammy, I know more about Menudo than you ever will know. So,
and during this Menudo cook-off, you have it's a huge success, correct? It's out. It's a ton of people come to this event, right? The Menudo cook-off. It was
a big
big
success. The Menudo cook-off.
Oh yeah, big time. And some of the crowd went out there and turned over tombstones in the graveyard. What is that big cemetery right there?
Mission?
No. Anyway, whatever it is, they knocked over a bunch of tombstones. Anyway, the county commissioner at that time, I forgot who it was, said, "You won't be invited back to do this again. You know, too close to the graveyard."
Was it Tom Stolhansky?
No, it wasn't Tom. It was, who was it?
What year was that, Chris?
73, I think, right? The Menudo cook-off was 73.
A.J. Plow?
A.J. Plow's another story. He was a friend of mine.
I knew he was.
Oh, he talked the redneck of the rednecks.
So you knew him pretty well, right? He was a pretty successful politician, oil man too.
When they'd run me down there to the courthouse to fill in for somebody, Jim McCrory would be on vacation or something. They'd put me down there, and Albert Pena was in there, and Powell Thompson was dropping bombs on Albert, and I liked Albert and A.J. Plow.
These are just real historic figures in the
all county commissioners.
In the San.
Yeah.
So you're because you're a reporter of the Express, you're blended in with musicians, mafioso guys, right? When we call them, or mob, they thought they were the mob. When the Express guy tells you hang around with gangsters and pimps, and he's telling you, we can't have you. And Murdoch comes in and buys it. But pre-Murdoch, you said a line that I really love. My whole life is a bunch of insane shit.
That's true.
Is that true, Sam?
That's true.
I know.
And that can't be, that line is just awesome. That's just.
Is that the final straw with the Express News? You wouldn't give up your friends?
No, Murdoch came in.
No, but I'm saying that because of all your underbelly friends, they got sick of you hanging around there?
About
the Express News, what do you think the final straw was?
The departure with them.
Because of your character friends, you wouldn't give them up?
Well, the executive editor of the Express News who hired me didn't even know me when he hired me, was Charles Kilpatrick.
Yeah. Yep.
And he was a social climber. He wanted to be somebody. And he was basically scared that I was going to embarrass him to death, I think. And
you'd embarrass him.
Yeah, that I would embarrass him with all these characters like Wille Nelson. Willie had a drummer by the name of Paul English, and
Paul
hadn't
English
gotten out really, but Paul was a pimp before he hooked up with Willie.
So the drummer for Willie was a pimp.
He was a Fort Worth pimp, and a bad news guy too. And he became friends with Willie, and he kind of cleaned up his act. And but he became Willie's drummer.
Wow.
And Paul and I were friends, and so. Actually, there was a snitch involved that was going to Kilpatrick with some stuff about me it had to come from the Wille Nelson camp. It couldn't have come from any place else. And I knew who it was.
Wow.
And I still know who it was. He's deceased today. But he was feeding old Charlie with all this information, and Charlie was scared I was going to embarrass the paper, something horrible. And so that's when he called me in and said, I can't have you working here anymore because you're so. I said, why are you firing me? And by that time, the Express News had financed the book that I wrote, the first one called The Best of Sam Kindrick, which was a compilation of a bunch of columns. And
that book was called The Best of Sam Kindrick.
Right, and it was a compilation of a lot of columns and stuff I'd written for the Express News. He said, I just can't have you here anymore. And I had all these books, and I had a wife and 3 kids at home that I was trying to feed, and I got a resentment against Charlie over that deal.
Yeah.
But I remember they had the Express News guys with dollies bringing those books down
to give you your books back.
Dump them into my truck.
And then that was it. Basically, you just left that day. Of all those years there, you have that. He calls you in his office, can't have you. I think maybe you're not good for the paper, meaning
Right.
the characters you know and run with. I don't know how that really pertained to your reporting, to be honest with you.
No.
Yeah. And then that relationship right there was severed, right? Just
Right.
that day.
I was fired on the spot.
That's just unreal.
So how long after you left the Express News, Sam, was your first issue of Action ready for the street?
Shortly thereafter, but right after I was fired, Charlie Lieck and Jack Leon both came to me and said, "We'll follow. They cannot fire you like this. We can have you reinstated."
And my dad would have done that.
Charlie offered to, Jack Leon offered to do it.
Yep.
And I said, if they don't want me working for them, I don't want to work for them. They said,
Yeah.
but you don't understand. I said, yeah, I do understand. And so
you thought, let me do my own thing.
Just do my own thing. And I don't know what gave me the idea that I could print a magazine or a newspaper, but I got started at it.
And so let's talk about that newspaper. That's an important part. I do want to talk about the Kexel days, but the newspaper and the Susan Reed stuff from the jail is just fantastic. I'm sorry, but it's just great stuff. But let's talk about the Action magazine. So you start this magazine, and it starts in 75.
Right.
And it ends, and are you still doing it?
No, I quit it about 4 years ago.
So let's say
I'll tell you when I stopped it, when the outbreak.
Right, COVID hit. So we're going to say 75 to 2020.
Yeah.
This magazine that comes out monthly,
right,
has been going on from that many years.
Right.
And you've covered a lot of great stories. And the thing about Action, and you can interject anytime you want, is it doesn't just cover music. It covers politicians. It covers characters.
Basically, yeah.
It covers so many different things within the Texas culture. Right. Not just because we originally, not now, started with a lot of characters, didn't we, around this market? It was a great kind of wild, wild west kind of market, wasn't it? The politicians were off the cuff. Everybody were individually. They were individuals. They weren't like part of some corporate team back then.
Yeah,
they were
characters. I was hanging out with fighters like Al Jurgens and people like that, and Bobby Thomas, and just a bunch of off the main trail, you know. And the first column I had in the Express News, I called it Offbeat.
Offbeat.
And,
it's cool. And then when you start Action, you're now on your own doing this magazine that you have to write and produce each month. So it was eating your time. You were out there in the club scene, seeing some groups. You were talking to people,
selling ads
as well. So you had Lone Star, but you also had other people. And so throughout this career of this magazine, what are your fondest memories of that magazine? What are the moments the highs and the lows of Action? Like, what do you remember as, man, when I had Action, this was a really high moment for me.
Weren't you up to 32 pages at one time, Sam?
Yeah, or more.
Yeah, or more. 48, I think, once. But
I think 40.
Those were the high rolling days, right?
Yeah.
Did you have salespeople at that time? I remember one of my girlfriends worked for you.
Yeah,
one time.
I had a few.
Yeah.
They came and they went, and there was not enough money there for anybody to make any money. But the salespeople were like they were drawn to the whole deal. You know,
the lifestyle.
Yeah, the lifestyle and the basic. I guess the outlaw image. I don't know.
It was.
People talk about outlaw all the time, but you know,
it was.
It's kind of like your father, Charlie. He lost his voice, and when somebody would come down on him, he had a one answer, and I guess I don't know whether we ought to do it here.
Yeah, you can, Sam.
You can do it.
Fuck him.
Yeah, fuck him.
That's right.
He even had his kid around the house one day, annoying him, his stepchild, and Travis, and he kept going. I said, "Boy, that kid's gonna get." And his stepmom said, "You know, what'd she say?" She goes, "Charlie, something about Travis." He goes, "Fuck Travis."
Yeah, fuck Travis. I said, "Dad, Travis is trying to do
Travis. Fuck Travis."
Yeah,
he just
little kids running around like God. Charlie with the little kid, you know.
Yeah.
When I was born, Charlie had the big divorce with my mom. So when I was actually born, he left my mom when she was pregnant with me.
Elaine was beautiful.
Yeah, my mom. She was, and so, I got to know him, post the operation and that voice and so forth. But it was he was a funny, brilliant man.
Yeah.
Well, we went to a lot of cool joints, Sam. Burnt Orange, Sam Houston. I'm sure you knew Sam.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some.
Okay,
of those.
well, we'll talk about.
Well, no, I want to.
Well, we were
so you would freak with these clubs, Fred Safair, Mike Safair,
Phil, George, and Mike. So Navy and the Commanders.
You had these clubs that my dad sort of was at as well, but you had these clubs where you would freak it because you were drinking pretty heavily during this time.
Heavily.
Like you have stories
night and day, every day.
But at the Express News days, were you when you were Express News? Yeah.
He talks about the days.
I skimmed it. I didn't read it like you.
You're talking about the days where he's getting up in the morning and he's got the shakes, right?
Bad.
And you have to go get a couple of brewskis down the street. Or
there was a place called Melody Room across from the Express News, and I'd go in and because I didn't get in to the mid-morning because I worked in the morning paper, and I couldn't do it. I would have to get a beer, about 2 or 3 beers in me before my hands would steady down enough to where I could get on that manual typewriter and bang away on the damn thing. And I had to have it. I didn't realize, I don't know what an alcoholic was in those days. I just knew I needed the juice, and if I didn't get it, and what I found out later, I was going into withdrawals, actually. But I had to have that level of alcohol in me, a certain level, before my hands would work, where I could type.
My brother read the whole book. I didn't have time because I got it late, but I skimmed it. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the characters in the Commanders, Navy Club, Sam Houston, those joints you met? Like, you knew Phil and Mike and George Safair, right?
I lived in the Commander's Room.
That was your favorite?
After hours place, because Mike Safair and I became real close, almost like brothers.
Can you tell the listeners about what that was about, the Navy and the Commanders, how they operated? Because
well, they were supposed to have federal charters, the Navy Club and the Commander's Room. But after it was all over with, and finally the Attorney General stepped in and said, "You got to close those things. There was no such thing as a federal charter." The two brothers, Mike and George, ran the Commander's Room, and their brother Phil, the Navy Club. And the two brothers and the other brother did not get along at all.
Nor did they talk to Fred, their fourth brother.
Yeah.
He had the Red Baron on Burr Road and Harry Wurzbach, yeah.
Right. You had to remind me of Fred. I'd forgotten about Fred.
He worked for Dad as an investigator.
Right. That's right. I remember that now. Yeah. But Mike and I became close, real close. We were like the best friend that I ever had. And
can you tell us a little bit about his character and how y'all got along?
Well, he was a former policeman who he got bounced off the police department because he insisted on running the nightclub. They gave him a choice. You can either be a policeman or you go on and do your nightclub, and he chose the nightclub. But every cop on the beat in the San Antonio Police Department was a big fan of his because he finished at the top of the cadet class, and so as a result, all the policemen drank in the Commander's Room
after hours, right?
After hours, it's illegal as hell, but they provided Mike and George with the protection that they needed, so nobody bothered them down in the Commander's Room, and so I lived in the place. I'd leave that Commander's Room with the sun coming up some mornings.
My dad did too. Did you ever? You didn't like the Navy as much? The Navy Club?
Phil Safair did. Yeah, I didn't have anything against Phil, but I became friends with the other two brothers, and there was a big rift between them. And actually, it was Mike Safair that I became real close with, and we would drink beer on the weekends and go out and take our kids to Hemisphere and all that kind of stuff until the last time, and when I got bored from the Commander's Room, and I got into
story
it
in the book
with a state representative named Stanford Smith. It was really a nasty thing, we were rolling in the dirt and rolling in the floor and breaking glasses and shit. And Mike said, I can't have you in here anymore doing this stuff. So I said, does that mean I'm bored? And he said, it kills me, but you're bored. He was about to cry. I remember that. So. And later years, when I sobered up and everything, I went back and I saw him, and he had that little club out there on West Avenue called Safair's. And I hadn't had a drink in years at that time. And so I told him, I said, he had loaned me $200 right before that I got into it and I knew I needed to pay him back. So I told him, after all these years, I've got you $200 right here. And he said, took the $200 and stuck it back in my shirt pocket. He said, and he started crying. He said, the important thing to me is that you came back. We're friends. We're still friends. So
they had good hearts, those guys.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Safair's history of the earlier clubs? You remember the Rickshaw? I don't know if you remember that one.
Well, the Rickshaw was the Rickshaw before it became the Commander's Room.
Right.
I was in there drinking with all of them, and the Holiday Club too. And I can't remember who had the Holiday.
I don't remember.
It'll come back.
Marine Room. There was a bunch of them.
Oh yeah.
You ready to talk about Sam Houston yet? Or you want to wait for?
No, I'm going to wait on that one.
Go ahead.
I want to jump back a little bit. I do kind of want to get a little bit, even though you might not want to, and you can tell me no, a little bit on the hardcore drinking days, because there's a couple funny stories in there that are really good. You, Willie, and them are in a Mercedes back over here behind a club in Parambital with the girl. What's her name? What's her name?
Well, that was a Foxy Lady Saloon.
Foxy Lady Saloon.
And Big Carol Cannon ran the thing, and she had all these girls there. But Willie was interested in one of the girls, and so we were in Willie's Mercedes behind the Foxy Lady when he had the Red-Headed Stranger thing on tape, and he said, "I want you to listen to this thing." So
this is a big album that he had.
Yeah,
Triple platinum.
Before he released the album, which turned platinum and everything else. And I listened to the whole thing. I said, I don't think anybody will buy it because it was a concept thing. I said, I don't think a concept record is going to make it now. Willie said, that's what everybody else says. But it turned out to be his biggest one up to that point. So it shows you how much I know about it.
But the greatness is of just the visual of you're in a Mercedes, the back of a club, all y'all piled in. Larry was there.
Larry Trader was in the car, and me, Willie, and
the girl.
Big Carol was in there, and the other girl was the one that Willie was interested in was Miss Joyful.
Miss Joyful.
Miss Joyful. She had names for all the girls.
I love it. I just love that story, just because it's such a visual. You can see in 70 soda Mercedes in the back of a club on Parambital.
Marijuana smoke so thick in there you couldn't even breathe.
And basically, there's a point where Willie kind of said, "I'm done with anything hard. I'm just going to smoke weed. You guys need to come with me, the band, y'all." But they didn't come with Willie. But he was like, "I'm just exclusively smoking weed, and I'm not doing any more hard drugs."
Well, I don't know if he even said that or not. I asked him one time if he wanted a Black Molly, and he said, I've already had one. And I don't know if he actually did any hard drugs or not, but I know weed was always his thing. And finally, he decided he didn't want any hard drugs in Nelson camp. He even put signs up on the wall said, "If you're wired, you're fired." In the bus,
you're wired, you're fired.
Yeah, and so we're hiding the speed. And it's when I went out on tour with him for a short time.
That is crazy stuff.
We're all hiding from Willie at that time when we did the speed.
So you're on speed. Y'all are doing speed. Willie's smoking dope only. Y'all are high as a kite out on the road.
Yeah.
On this tour that's kicking ass, right? It's doing well.
Willie smoked weed so long that he's inured to it. It doesn't even faze him.
Okay, got it. But you're out on the road and it's getting kind of crazy out there, right?
Right.
And so you're just engulfed in this, harder stuff than liquor. You're like into the hard stuff. And so
was the methamphetamine by that time.
That's just, what a survivor story. But you said basically in the book, you're saying that tour was kind of crazy in that you knew you couldn't do that again. Like that one tour was when you went out with him, it was pretty hard. You were pretty involved in the drugs, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's when we wound up in Jackson, Michigan. That's when I said I met the devil in Jackson.
That's right.
Because Willie was doing an outdoor show, and we were on the bus, and this old woman that she managed to get on the bus. I don't know how in the hell. Ever seemed like every place where they played, somebody would get backstage that nobody knew who they were or how the hell they got backstage. And she had owned a massage parlor in Jackson. We found out later. But she passed this little silver pipe around, and I was on the bus with Don Bowman. Don was a country comedian at that time, and Billy Cooper was just a road hand and a friend that hung out. And she passed that little silver pipe around, and Cooper, I remember him looking over at me, and his eyes were as big as banjos. He said, "It's that pipe." It was hitting me about that time. It turned out it was angel dust.
Oh,
good God!
What is the name for it?
THC,
PCP.
PCP,
horse
right.
tranquilizer. Yep.
And I'd never done it in my life. I can't imagine anybody doing it. But anyway, that's what happened. And then I started moving, and my body moved out of that bus. And I'll swear to God, I was hovering up over Jackson, and I saw the devil. And I mean, he had yellow pus running out of his nose and every place else. I was as scared as I've ever been in my life. And we were huddled on the bus. We locked the bus, and there was a carnival going on down. We could hear the Ferris wheels and all that stuff. And Billy Cooper said, if we could get something to eat in us, maybe we'd come down off of this stuff. And well, I'll tell you what, I'll go down to that carnival and get some hot dogs. And I ran out. I was terrified. I ran down that hill and bought a big sack of hot dogs and ran back to the bus, scared to death, and beat on the door. And they let me in, and we locked the bus. And later, when the show was over, Willie and the band get down there, and they're trying to get on the bus. We've got them locked off the bus. We're all still just goofier than shit. I'll never forget it. And that night, we were pulling out of that fairground and going into Jackson. That's when the old tour buses had windows that opened. That was before all the. And I could hear these things going click, 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 click.
Things like hitting the bus. You thought it was hail or something.
I thought it's not hailing. It's not raining. It was CDs. The musicians.
It was cassettes. You said cassettes, basically, right?
Cassettes. They were trying to get them in the bus so maybe that Willie would listen to one of the songs.
Oh, demos.
And demos. And then all they do is, the road manager just sweep them all up and they'd throw them in the trash after the deal. But that was my deal in Jackson, Michigan, when I met the devil. I swear, I really believe I did too.
Yeah, you probably actually did.
I think it was real.
Yeah, it
I think
probably
that
was.
son of a bitch was there, and I guarantee you, and I'm a believer.
Oh, I believe you on that one. I really do. And now I want to jump to the Express and News. You had kicked someone out of the Menudo cook-off that ended up giving you a job at Kexel. You run into him at a club,
right.
And you thought he was bullshitting you.
Right.
And he said, "Why don't you come over to the station tomorrow at 4 a.m. and put you on a morning show?" And you had kicked this guy out of your Menudo cook-off in 73.
Right.
And now in 75, I think it was, I'm not sure what year, or 74 rather, he comes and gives you a job at Kexel in the morning.
Radio.
Kexel,
notorious
incredible station.
Yep.
Just everyone here still wears Kexel shirts.
104.5.
And so tell me how that happens.
Well, his name was Hal Davis, and he was the general manager of Kite and Kexel.
Okay.
Kite was a respectable station, and Kexel was the hippie station. And Ron Houston, who I knew was the morning jockey, he had the morning drive on Kexel. And Hal Davis and his wife got into this big screaming fight out at the Menudo cook-off, and the constable came over and said, "What are you going to do with these people?" I said, "Throw them out of there. Get them out." I didn't
get them out of the Menudo cook-off.
I didn't know Davis was the chairman. the manager of Kexel Kite or anything, and so bounced them on out of there. And after the months later, after the Menudo cook-off, well, I've already been fired from the Express by then, and I'm shooting pool in this little old beer joint down off San Pedro, and this guy walks in, and it's Hal Davis.
So Hal Davis is at this pool joint you're shooting pool at.
Yeah, he comes.
The guy you kicked out of the Menudo.
Right, he comes in and he says, "How does it feel to be out on your ass, Mr. Big Shot?"
How does it feel to be on your ass, Mr. Big Shot?
I said, "I remember kicking your ass out of the Menudo cook-off." I said, "Yeah, you did." And he said, "How does it feel not to be a big shot anymore?" Or something to that effect. And I said, "Feels fine, Davis." And he said, I got a proposition for you. And he said, "You may tell me to go to hell and what you can if you want to, but I've got a hippie radio station, and you're just about weird enough to to appeal to these crazy kids, dope fiend kids that I've got out there. He said, "You want a job?" And I said, "I don't know anything about radio." And he said, "You show up at our studios in the morning at 5 o'clock, and if you want to, and there'll be a job for you, and we'll pay you $70 a week, something like that." Anyway, I showed up there, and Ron Houston was there, and I knew Ron basically.
Yeah.
And he said, he called me Soul. He always called me Soul. He said, "Soul, come on in." And I'd never been in a radio recording studio in my life, ever. And he pushed a microphone in front of my face, and I said, "Well, what do I do?" And he said, "Well, Soul, just start talking." And that's how it started. Ron always said, "I wished I'd have taped that first one."
But during the morning, now you're doing the morning show.
Yeah.
And you're doing it with Ron, correct?
Right.
And then the DJ there was Alan Grimm.
Well, he was one of the DJs on Kexel.
And you told me like he would break bands like Aerosmith, and he'd play, because it was the best station ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing.
Well, see, the jocks just played what they wanted to. There was no programming.
No programming.
Freeform.
Sweet Michael Boykin come on at 2 o'clock, and he's still alive. He's down in Tennessee somewhere, but he'd play country. And then Who was that?
Who was that? Who's still alive? What'd you say?
Sweet Michael Boykin.
Boykin.
And Martha Martinez is still around, and so is Barbara Morello. But Martha did jazz, and that's all she'd play on her show, and it would be jazz.
That's
and
crazy.
So they had all kinds of different stuff.
And so you're there for you're doing the morning show about 2 years, because it gets bought out, right?
Yeah.
Again, a big company, which is interesting to me, because I just thought the bigger acquisition mergers where they come and buy a company didn't start that soon in the San Antonio community. I didn't think Rupert came in and bought the Express in 73. I didn't think somebody would come in 75 that early and buy up stations. It just, to me, I always think that last was later, like in the 80s
Lowry
and the 90s.
Mays era.
Lowry Mays era. But it's amazing in your book to find out, a great piece of knowledge for me, that these big companies were coming into San Antonio and taking over these small rogue stations in the 70s.
Yeah. Kexel and Kite were owned by Doubleday.
Okay.
Doubleday finally went out of the book, went out of the broadcasting and just went strictly to books.
Okay. So now, I want to talk about the jail time that you spent and the probation you were put on. Then Susan Reed comes in and you call it the miracle in 144th court or something.
144th.
2 jury boxes.
Yeah.
Remember that?
And so you're on probation. You go to the county jail. That's a great story in the book. I want the readers to read this. You're there, and you're thinking that Susan Reed, who's
hanging judge,
can't stand.
She was a prosecutorial
judge.
She was a prosecutorial judge. Came straight out of the DA's office and never was on the defense side.
Unreal.
Correct, Sam?
Well, I'd been busted before, and Alan represented me the first time, and I got a probation, and somehow or another got another probation, and by this time I was going to go. So
go to jail.
I was going to go to prison. It was just a matter of, actually, they found me guilty, and my sentence was 10 years. And they, for some reason or other, they shuffled my paperwork around, and it was almost a year before, bam, I got arrested with no bond. Said, "You're going to prison." So I didn't realize at the time that I could have a hearing, plead my case about the probation. So yes, we're going into court, and so I asked Alan. I said, "What is this? What kind of a defense can I do now? I've already been sentenced."
That's right.
He said, "No, we have to have a sentencing hearing." That's what it was. It hadn't been finally sentenced. The judge had already ruled on it, but you have a sentencing hearing, and I didn't realize that at the time. So Alan didn't do a damn thing. I said, "Well, why didn't you get me any witnesses?" He said, "Wasn't any way. Susan Reed is never going to put anybody back on the streets. It's broken 3 probations. You wouldn't have a chance." He said, so I didn't get you any witnesses. I said, you didn't get me any witnesses? No. And that morning, Alan shows up in the court, and I do too, and the witnesses start coming in from Club 12, which is a recovery place. And one came in right after another, and finally the courtroom filled up with people that were testifying that they thought I wanted to stay sober and clean and all that good stuff, that they really believed, that anyway. And so I think the politics came into it because all the judges in the whole courthouse showed up for that hearing. They wanted to see what she was going to do with me. I mean, there were district judges and all the lawyers that hung around the courthouse and every place else. So the courtroom was packed.
God, that's incredible.
So I said, well, Alan said, who do you think we ought to call? I said, well, call Roger. Roger's my sponsor. And Roger gets up there and he owns these Mexican restaurants. And then another one is a stockbroker and another one is another big time lawyer. And so finally Reed saw all she could stand, and she said, I'm going to take this under advisement, and we're going to think about it, and I'll rule on it in a week. And she told Alan and I to show up in her chambers in a week. And so she said, on aggravated possession of methamphetamine, you could get from 10 to 99. She said, if I ever see you or Alan Brown with you in my court again, you're getting 99. I'll promise you that. I believed her. And
yeah, you should believe her. She was a nightmare.
So,
and you get 10 years probation, right?
I got 10 years probation.
And that's a miracle in her court.
She'd never done that before in her life. I said,
God, what was up her ass? What was the deal with her?
She I don't know, but I talked to her just the other day on the phone.
How's she doing?
Well, she says she's doing all right. I don't know.
Huh. I just don't understand why she had to throw the book at so many people. I mean, you can take other things into consideration, especially if somebody's trying to rehabilitate themselves. I mean, but so now I want to talk about the madam. The madam. This is great stuff. And so she has a brothel, right? So let's let you tell the story of the chapter on the madam.
The madam, right?
Madam T. Brown.
Well, she was my friend. I met her in a Navy club back when the Severe brothers were blowing and going with those things. She's a beautiful woman, pretty, charming too. She was something else. She had a personality, but I knew she was a madam at the time, and she walked up to me in that Navy club, and she said, "You're a newspaper boy. I know who you are." And I said, "Yeah, I know who you are too." And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I've been a working girl for a long time," and she said, "But don't get any ideas because you can't afford me. You couldn't afford me if you wanted to."
And she was a fan of Mick Jagger, right?
Yeah.
So she had a diamond dentist in her beautiful tooth drilling.
No, that wasn't Teresa. That was Big Carol.
That was Big Carol. My bad. So Madam had a book that she knew, a black book, let's say.
She had a date book where she kept all of her. She had a record of all of her customers.
And there were some politicians in town and people of affluence that were around the community, correct?
Right. She scared them to death because she had this trick book and
trick list.
Trick list, yeah. And there were some big time attorneys on that thing, judges and everybody else. So they were scared to death that she was going to release the thing. And
that's after she got busted.
Yeah.
The Teresa Brown trick list. She had
a heart, Teresa did. And she honestly didn't want all these homes to be broken up. If she turned that trick list loose, then all of these wives out here would find out what their husbands had been doing. She didn't want that. And she fought that like big time. She just did not want to hurt the people, her clients. And she had a set of rules. The girls that worked for her, She didn't put up with any big bullshit. They couldn't go around barefoot, and they had to wear shoes, and she had a set of rules.
And she eventually, the Black Book does end up with whoever prosecuted her, correct? But she gets it back somehow.
Oh, that trick book wound up with this.
La Prensa, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't even La Prensa. It was another little West Side magazine, that little news thing that nobody had ever heard of, but they wound up with a thing.
They actually wound up with the book.
Yeah, and later years, I said, Teresa, how come you give that book to that little rat deal when you could have let me have it? And I said, I wouldn't have ever released it, but we could have scared the shit out of a bunch of them.
Yeah.
If I had it.
Oh, God, that would have been just so awesome. That's an acquisition I think would have been awesome in your hands.
Judge Ted Butler was one of the big names on her trick list.
Oh,
everybody
God.
in the world knew it, but Ted was her major one. You know.
Was he a big time?
He was DA after Dad, after Barlow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But he came to that house they had on Euclid Street. Chris and I's dad set up a bar inside the house on Euclid because he got thrown out of the San Jacinto Club. So Dad and Gene just set up a little thing where you went in and poured your own drinks, and you left a little money there. And Ted
just remind me, Gene's not
Lieck.
still with it.
No, none of the Leaks are here.
Okay.
They're all gone, yeah. Gene died in 2000 at a Phoenix station on Fredericksburg Road, Christmas 2000.
Okay.
I want to pick back up in this interview and talk a little bit about something personal to me. I have this elderly gentleman that comes in my studio, and I don't know a lot about the Club Eastwood, the old Club Eastwood. But I told him, you should write a song about it. He's an older black man that's writing a gospel blues record. And so he told me, let's write the song together about the Club Eastwood. He went and read about it. And people don't know about anything about Eastwood, and it's a phenomenal story. And Eastwood was a club, correct?
Yeah, Sam, walk us through the history of Eastwood that you know. I know a little bit about it, but I know you do too. You and I did a story on it one time. Johnny Phillips.
Your father was a big fan of Johnny Phillips, and he kind of Charlie had the run of Eastwood. You know, he had his campaign party out there.
I didn't know that.
Can you tell us about your first time out there? What you remember? Was that when you first got to town, or?
No, one night Dan Cook took me out there. That was the first time I ever went to Eastwood, and I immediately was drawn to it. Gatemouth Brown was the backup
house musician.
Yeah, he was in there picking, and I had been around some good guitar players before. I never saw anything like Gatemouth Brown. He was something else with a guitar.
Can you tell us about the crowd each night, who came in there, what it was like, and why?
Super duper, man. It's my favorite place. Of course, it was an after-hours place, and it was illegal to drink in those days, but Johnny Phillips always maintained a connection with the DA, and like he and Charlie were friends, and before that.
Charlie's my dad.
Yeah. So the deal was that you could bring your alcohol in there, your whiskey in there, and they'd serve you setups. But the rule was you had to keep it out of sight. It had to be on the floor. And so everybody had to put the jug on the floor and then pour the drinks. But
can you tell the listeners about the crowd out there, what it consisted of?
Just about everybody went to Eastwood.
But during the segregation times, correct?
Yeah. Right. I saw Fats Domino there. I saw Ray Charles there. I saw
B.B. King.
B.B. King, name them. They came through Eastwood. The greatest black entertainers in the world all went through Eastwood. And Johnny Phillips had a rapport with those people.
Good
if he
connection.
needed money, he could pick up the phone, and Tina Turner would show up, and they'd put on a show, whatever. You know.
But was it a few places? I'm not mistaken. You were around more than me back then, obviously. But were the black and white community could mix?
They mixed in Eastwood. There was no discrimination in Eastwood.
And that was unusual for Bexar County, San Antonio at the time?
Yeah, but music is a different deal. There's no segregation in music. There never has been. And so many of those guys just happened to be of the black persuasion, the great musicians, and they were all at Eastwood. They all played Eastwood at one time or another. I don't believe that. I can't think of any of them that didn't.
So he was so connected to those agents to bring these people in. And what was a typical night like there? Was it just electric in that place?
Yeah, it was dark. You didn't see much.
It was dark going out there, too, way out in the boonies at that time, wasn't
Eastwood was always dark.
Yeah.
It was dark going in and dark going out.
Can you walk us through a night you walked in, you pay your cover, and what's going on over there?
Yeah, and I don't remember what the cover was, but I don't think it was very much. Wasn't a high-dollar place at all.
And you'd find a place to sit and just start visiting with people and listen?
You sit at tables, but like I say, it was dark. You didn't get in there and talk to the other customers. You just went in and enjoyed the show.
And it was way out then, right on East Houston. That was a drive back then.
Yes, and I might add that was the home of Miss Wiggles. She was a great entertainer. She danced standing on her head in a kitchen chair.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
She was a contortionist. She could move every muscle in her body. Her name was Tonya Patterson, and she was incredible. I loved her.
What was her name?
Tonya Patterson.
But what was her nickname?
Miss Wiggles.
Miss Wiggles. And she came, her home base was Toronto, Canada. But she did Eastwood a lot. And she was incredible. She'd get on her head, stand on her head in this kitchen chair and move the chair around. And she could literally make every muscle in her body twitch and move at the same time. Her arms was like snakes up and down both arms. She played Charlie's campaign.
Charlie's Dad had her. He had a bunch of them.
My dad had Mrs. Wiggles at his campaign party.
Yeah.
At the last blast too, after he got beat. Remember
the last blast? Yeah.
You can't make that shit up. Only my dad would do something like that. So Mrs. Wiggles was out there, and then they had these incredible entertainers. And pretty much, was it a 7-night-a-week deal? Was it every night?
I don't remember.
Johnny was a worker. It probably was. He was. He was a hustling guy. Because you and I did.
Your father was one of the biggest characters that I knew. Anyway,
who's that? Oh, our dad was. Yeah.
I want to talk about him in a minute. So at Eastwood during those days, you could go in and see B.B. King. All the black entertainers would come through Eastwood, and this club owner, his name?
Johnny Phillips.
Johnny Phillips had connections with all these people. I mean, they all knew to come play Eastwood.
They all did.
And everybody knew to go out there and see him. Remember Ike Campman, all those old famous San Antonio people of West?
When Johnny would get a little bit behind on it money-wise, he had this one entertainer would came out. I can't remember who it was, but the second time I went out, there was a fat man sitting at a piano, and you know who that was.
Yeah.
And he would just, if he wanted to pick up his revenue, he would book somebody in there.
Like Fats Domino.
He needed money. Ike and Tina Turner would come play for nothing if he needed it.
Chubby Checker.
Yeah.
He told us, Sam, when you and I did that story on him in the mid-'80s for your magazine, he told us he only had one white entertainer, Al Hurt.
Really?
That's what he told you and I. Yeah, you wrote it in the story. I'm going to let my brother read it.
I'd forgotten about it.
Well, he just said that he didn't elaborate with.
Well, Gatemouth Brown was his house guy.
Yep.
He was there every night.
And what size would you say the club was?
I don't know.
About 3,000-4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And so was it low ceiling? Was it black walls? Was it just dark lit?
Just dark. That's all I remember.
And then they had a stage where the performers performed.
The stage wasn't real high. It was like eye level.
So the stage was eye level. The performers would come in. It's all dark and pretty packed, correct? Packed.
Yeah.
So it was energy. There was just electricity in that air.
There's no place in the world like Eastwood Country Club. I've never heard of another one like it.
And so you went out there for years until about it shuttered?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
what time would you arrive there on a typical night at Eastwood?
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
So you'd head there at 2 or 3, and these artists would play that late?
They would play that late.
Yeah.
I know.
That's just insane.
We'd leave places like the Commander's Room or the Rickshaw or Navy Club. And those were all after hours joints, and then we'd go out to Eastwood. And Eastwood, I guess they probably went till daylight out there sometimes. But,
And that was a hell of a drive back then, Sam.
yeah, it was.
Because
Especially when you're drunk as a goat.
So you're heading out to Eastwood. You're probably coming back at dawn.
Yeah, a lot of times.
you saw the sunrise out of those clubs.
So I saw the sunrise sometimes leaving the commander's room. That's
Right.
how bad off I was.
And how long would you say the drive was out there? If you were like in town on San Pedro, you'd go out there.
Oh, not 15 minutes.
On
Okay.
East Houston.
It's just right out Houston Street. 15 or 20 minutes.
Was it desolate? Was there places? Was it on a hill? Was it just a flat building? How did it look?
I
On the
don't
outside.
remember.
Well,
Okay.
it was
Always dark when I
rural
got
going
there.
out. It was rural going out there,
Yeah.
and it's just east of 410 South,
Yeah.
where the Central Freight Line is. So that's before 410 South when you go out there.
Right.
So it was a drive, and it was country.
Right.
And it's called
Crazy.
Eastwood Country Club.
And then what year did it sort of go down? Or-
70s, right, Sam? Late 70s. He started having some closing times out there, because you and I interviewed him in the 80s,
Yeah.
and he wanted to get it open back up. And I think the lots rented it from him, and then it burnt or vice burnt, and then
Yeah, it burned.
and that was it. He could never get another tenant in there. He
Yeah.
wanted the money. He lived on Hayes Street. That's where I picked him up to do the interview.
Maybe.
Chain link fence, about 8-9 feet, and he had those Doberman pinchers.
Yeah.
He had some Doberman pinchers guarding his house.
Right.
And then what year do you think you started going out to Eastwood? My dad was the DA in the late 50s, 60s. So what year did you start? My dad was a big fan out there, huh?
Oh, Charlie loved Eastwood.
Well, I started going out there shortly after I started working at Express News.
It's early 60s.
Yeah.
60.
We were hitting all those joints.
Did you ever go to the Rusty Nail?
Yeah. The rest, it was on the east side.
Yeah, that was another big one.
Yeah.
How about the Keyhole Club?
I knew about it. I didn't
Did
go.
never go to Keyhole. Those are East Side
Most
joints.
of those, yeah, there weren't very many whites going to.
No, Eastwood was the only one.
So there was a lot of white integration of white guys going to Eastwood to watch black performers.
Right.
That's just crazy. And I'd say that was a very unique thing back then.
Well, the black entertainers just happened to be the best entertainers.
That's correct.
They may be to this day.
Yes, absolutely. And so if you were to describe, you just said there was nothing like Eastwood. Was it, and I already asked you this, I'm being redundant, but was it just that it was just a magical place, or was it just both a magical time and place, or was just the fact that whites and blacks were coming together to listen to music? What made it so special to all the different clubs that you visited or that you hung out at?
The music.
Okay.
No place else had people like Ike and Tina and Fats Domino and just one right after another. That's the only place in the world that something like that could have ever happened.
And I wonder how he got him to San Antonio. Like, how did they, it's just the way that the club was set up. Like, he got all these people to come to San Antonio.
I heard the story about how Eastwood got started, but I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly.
Well, one
how.
day when you remember that, we need to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, I want to talk about, and I don't want this, you tell me if you don't want to talk about this, but in your book, the final chapter is very emotional about your son.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly, it's just a heartwarming. When you read that chapter, you feel everything, because you take the person, the reader, to the spot and to the moment in what you're feeling
Right.
in that moment. And your son Grady and your other son as well. And when he took his life, and that must have been an amazingly, just overall, the worst thing that ever happened in your life. Lowest point in your life.
Of course.
And in that book, in that chapter, that is a must read chapter for fathers.
Yeah.
And we don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Okay.
I loved him, but didn't know how to love him. I didn't know how to be a father.
Nor do I at times.
I was your running mate. I was your buddy. I was his friend, but I never knew how to be a father. I was too busy getting drunk through all those years. So
I met Grady at the magazine. He was pretty helpful over at that magazine.
He wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
He had some talent too, but he never had a chance. There wasn't enough money in the magazine for me and him both.
I got you.
And I wanted him to, but nothing turned out the way that I wanted it to. And I never knew. I don't know what clinical depression is. I still don't know. I hear them talking about it. I've read about it. It doesn't make any damn sense to me.
Yeah, me neither, actually.
He just decided to kill himself, and I got that call that morning. My younger son called me and said, "You got to come to the house." He was still living with his mother, and Grady was living with his mother at that time too, because he'd just broken up with the girlfriend he was living with. So he said, "Grady is dead," and I couldn't believe it. And I drove over there, and there were already some police cars there and stuff, and an ambulance, and I walked out in the backyard, and Grady had been covered up with a sheet. I remember that, and I hated cops. I just fucking hated them. And
not my dad.
And this one policeman came up and put his arm around me. And he said, "This is the hardest part of my job." And he said, "I know you don't like policemen, and a lot of policemen don't like you, but he said, I want to tell you one thing, that I really feel for you, and I'm going to pray for you." And I changed my opinion of law enforcement right there. Some of those guys are human, and they are. So.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a very difficult part of your life. How did it affect you from that point on? Like, let's say from that moment on, what changed, do you think? Did it get worse for you? Meaning, as far as, were you drinking during that time?
That time, no, I was sober.
You were sober?
I was 3 years sober.
3 years sober.
And by that time, I'd started talking to the man upstairs.
There you go.
Which I hadn't done in years and years and years. And the longer I've been in this recovery thing, the stronger my belief in God has become. And so God was there on that at that scene at the time.
Yeah.
And either that, if I didn't have a God, if I didn't have a hope, which it's all about, that we're all going to be together again.
Yes.
There's going to be another show. And if it wasn't for that, I would have nothing. But I know I'm going to see that kid again.
Yeah, you are.
No question about it. And that's what keeps me going now.
Yeah.
We want to get back to some of the old joints you hung out with. I want you to tell our listeners about some of the interesting characters like Sam Houston. Did you ever meet Sam Houston?
Sam Houston, yeah. He owned the SWC Club and the Burn Orange.
San Jacinto?
Yeah, San Jacinto Club.
He was a character.
A lot of athletes showed up at those clubs, Perry Samuels, Samuels Glass. He was a former sprinter at the University of Texas, and a lot of attorneys showed up.
Was Sam a direct descendant of Sam Houston? They said he was.
I heard that too. I don't know for sure.
All of his clubs. What was your favorite nightclub he owned?
I didn't hear.
What was your favorite nightclub that Sam Houston owned? What was your favorite one to visit? I know you had your favorite.
San Jacinto.
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really
good one. Then the Burn Orange, he opened that later, and that became the favorite one.
And Jacinto was on McCullough, correct?
Lexington and Maine.
Yeah. Where they meet.
They're within a couple of blocks of each other.
That's
Burn
right.
Orange and the San Jacinto.
Yeah, the Burn Orange was. Yeah, our dad took us there, the Burn Orange and San
Jacinto Club.
San Jacinto.
Can you tell us about the uniqueness of the Burn Orange?
Yeah, well, the Burn Orange was frequented, by a lot of sports people. But then over at the San Jacinto Club, you had Tiny Walls, the big, gigantic black bartender that everybody loved, Tiny, and everybody knew him.
He had an annual barbecue.
Right.
Yeah. Did you ever go to that one?
Sure.
Yeah, that was an interesting joint.
I went to all of them.
Yeah.
Anytime there was a whoopee party going on, I was there.
Can you tell us a little bit about Chris and I's uncle, Jack Hanratty? Did you ever meet him?
I love Jack. I was a pallbearer at Jack's funeral.
Can you tell us the first time you met Jack and the history of Jack Hanratty?
I don't remember, but yeah, it was around the commander's room back in those days. And Paul Thompson hated him. Our columnist hated him with a passion, and the more Thompson put him down, the more interested I became. So, and so I started drinking beer with Jack. I would meet him at some of those afternoon beer joints.
Can you tell people about what he was like, what his business was, because they don't know?
He was a bookmaker.
Bookie.
Out in Castle Hills, where it's the most dangerous place you could ever run a book. But he ran the book, and he was a native of Ireland, and I'll never forget Jack one time. So I don't know what was going on in his life, but he just packed up one day and left. Nobody saw him. His wife didn't see him for a month, for 6 months. And what he did, he just left, went to Ireland and stayed for 6 months, and then came back. But Jack was he would stick $100 bills in my shirt pocket, and he and I got to where I really loved him, and he's one. He got Teresa Brown. Got me and Jack and Lee Trevino all kicked out of the San Francisco steakhouse one night. We were all in there drunk. Lee was in town. He was playing the golf tournament.
Famous golfer.
Yeah. And Teresa Brown, the famous madam, was in there.
Yep.
And I was in there. And
was Jack with y'all?
Yeah. Jack
Larry was there too, wasn't he?
Jack was famous for walking tabs. That's what it was.
Yeah. They would leave tabs.
They would go to the bathroom and disappear. And he ordered these porterhouse steaks for everybody in the whole joint. I mean, thousands of dollars worth of steaks, and then came time to pay. Well, Jack's gone. Well, there's Lee Trevino, the world's greatest golfer, and Teresa. And Teresa's cussing out the maitre d'. She's saying, "Don't you know who that is? This is the greatest golfer in the world." You blah 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 blah. And said, "Well, you are all going." So they kicked us all out of there. Kicked me, Teresa, Lee Trevino. And by that time, Jack Hanratty had disappeared, just gone. And
people were scared of Jack, weren't they?
Some people were. He shot a guy back in his youth, another club guy or something. But
and some of these characters in the book, I mean, they were some scary characters that you were hanging out with. The guys, the guy that has like all those counts of, 2 counts of aggravated assault, murder, a ton of misdemeanor. I mean, these characters were just they were outlaws.
Well, yeah, I guess, but I was kind of drawn to people like Jack Hanratty and Jack. Yeah, as you know, you have a cousin, Jack's niece. Little girl had horses. The world didn't know it, but Jack maintained her horses. He kept her in horses. Took great care of those kids, and he had a lot to him that a lot of people didn't understand. But I love Jack Hanratty.
Did you ever know a Booby Obadal?
I knew who he was, but I didn't know him personally.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about Bunny Eckert for our listeners, the history of Bunny Eckert?
Bunny, was ex-con. He'd been to prison for murder, and I think that on record, I think they have him. I don't know how many people he killed, but he killed a lot of people. And the reason that he didn't go to the penitentiary at the outset, because basically, and he did it with a shotgun. Most of the people he killed were other pimps. Bunny was a pimp, and he had a string of girls, and the other pimps, they were fighting over the girls, basically. So the public, John public, didn't really give a shit what happened to Bunny Eckert. He didn't go out here and kill any leading citizens. So,
and his disappearance. Can you tell our listeners about the disappearance of Bunny? And they never found him, did they? And you're convinced he was murdered, right?
Bunny was murdered, and he disappeared off the face of the earth, and his body has never been found. There's a lot of theories about it. Some people think that he was sunk into the middle of Canyon Lake. I don't know if that's true or not. That's not what I think. I think I know who killed Bunny Eckert, but I have no proof or anything else, and I'm not stupid enough to talk about anybody. But the man that killed Bunny, some say was an expert with explosives and acid and that sort of thing. They think that he was body was probably done away with it.
Dissolved.
Acid, yeah. But nobody knows it. he's never showed up. And some people say, well, if Canyon Lake ever goes dry, they'll find Bunny.
It's almost there.
Yeah, it's getting close.
Sam, can you tell my brother and I a little bit about the Fredericksburg World's Fair with the fight between Johnny Hernandez and Bobby Thomas?
Yeah,
Jimmy Carter's brother showed up.
Well, that was the Fredericksburg World's Fair was Bobby Thomas and
Johnny Hernandez.
Black belt. Johnny was a martial arts guy, and Bobby supposedly was a boxer and street fighter. And we had all that ballyhoo stuff, and so they met in a circus tent in Fredericksburg.
And that's one of the first bare knuckle fights ever, right? As far as a promoted fight.
The deal was they could put whatever they wanted on their hands, and Johnny comes out and he's got this tape stuff on his hands. I never was sure what he had on his hands, but Bobby, I know what Bobby had. Bobby had these gloves loaded with lead.
Oh my God!
He had them. Yeah, so he told me, he said, I'm going to kill this guy. And he said, Sambo, he said, I'm going to kill a Mexican out there today, and it's going to be Johnny Hernandez. And so anyway, they get out there, and Johnny had the weight, and he just overpowered Bobby with his weight. Bobby ran out of gas, but the thing about it, Bobby's hands got so heavy that he couldn't hold him up to defend himself. That's what beat him. He had too much lead in his gloves.
And Bobby Thomas, he had about 9 lives, wouldn't you say, on the street?
Oh, yeah.
In his hustling and bar days and fight days.
Yeah. And they were building hot rods, and he survived until one of those hot rods exploded and burned him all over his body and everything else.
Fell off a roof.
Yeah, and then he fell off a 2-story roof down into a canyon. Broke every damn bone in his body, including his neck and everything else, and he survived that. And I don't know what all that.
Well, I heard one time he was at a bar on Perrin Bidle, David Williams told me, and maybe Ernie Hosley's bar or something, and he ran his car into the bar or something, and I think Hosley shot him or something. I don't know. You'd have to straighten the story out because I don't even know.
The story was that Ernie Hosley owned Sugar Daddies and a couple of those clubs, but supposedly he and Bobby had this beef going between the two of them, and Hosley said that Bobby was trying to shake him down, that he was trying to get money out of him, or he would go physically harm him. But anyway, Bobby walks into Ernie Hosley's club and was shot, and everybody, a lot of people thought Hosley shot him, but it wasn't. It was a guy named, we called him Little Rudy. He was a lieutenant of Hosley's. But I remember that morning I got a call and said, go down to the Baptist Hospital if you want to see Bobby Thomas alive. And my office was down there pretty close. So I went on over there to the Baptist and went on in back there. They let me right back there where Bobby was laying there, blood all over the place and bandages and everything. And Bobby was laying on this stretcher, just as pale as a ghost. It looked like he was dead. But I'll never forget what he said. He looked over me, and he used to always call me Sambo. He said, Sambo. Said, tell Ernie that vengeance is mine.
Ooh.
I thought, oh, shit. But he lived. He survived that deal.
He had so many lives. Him and David were real close.
Yeah.
David Williams, another criminal. Wow, I really liked him, but
when I first Bobby, he could sell anything.
He could.
He was selling baby polar bear skins, and what he was doing, he was getting sheep skins and bleaching them in a bleach and a dryer, and they'd turn white as hell. And he was passing them off as baby polar bear skins. I remember that, and people were buying the damn thing.
He could sell anything.
Yeah.
Remember Sandy Barbie? You and I both liked her a lot.
She worked for me too.
She did. Yeah, she told me that the first time she fell in love with him, he went to some yard sale or somewhere, bought a few things, and went down the street and hiked them up to somebody else right there within a few blocks. Yeah. Made a few $100s that day. She said she was sold on him.
Right.
No, that's this stuff is just incredible. So this might be for Chip and I. And maybe it's not part of the book or anything, but, I'd like you to talk a little about my dad and meeting him and everything like that. And so my dad wasn't around when I was growing up because, he was divorced from my mom. But what do you remember about him, and how do you remember my father?
In the courthouse days, starting.
Courthouse days.
from the
in
courthouse.
general.
And then after that, when y'all would hang out in the joints together, and he was still trying cases, but he was a mess at that time.
Charlie had a brilliant mind, and nobody realized how brilliant it was because of his accident. His accident robbed him of his voice, but he had this hoarse whisper that he could have gone on and done everything that he ever dreamed of, but he had it in his mind that loss of that voice more or less ended his legal career. And it did, because Charlie didn't continue with his legal career. And he could have done anything in the world. He had a great mind, but this voice that he talked in, it was a hoarse, a big whisper, a loud whisper. And
did you cover any cases when he was DA, Sam, during those days? Were you ever in the courtroom when
the one that I covered was in Junction, Texas, and that's my hometown.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were in that one.
That's where they tried a guy named Drought. A guy
Somebody
named Davis had killed a guy named Drought
on Geneseo Road, correct? In Terrell Hills.
The lawyer name was Jimmy Drought, and Charlie was going to prosecute the guy, and Davis, and Charlie didn't have enough. He didn't have the right stuff, but
the evidence and stuff. He
didn't have the stuff to convict Davis of first-degree murder, but his heart told him he needed to. So Charlie tried for a conviction that most lawyers knew he wasn't going to get it.
But he wanted justice
because he was a friend of Jimmy Drought, and he thought Jimmy had been
brutally murdered, stomped to death.
So Charlie fought it and lost, and the Express News sent me up to Junction to cover the case, so they knew I was from Junction, and so I hung out with Charlie the whole time during the case, and then the jury came in, and the jury was right. Charlie didn't make enough case, but he was letting his heart do it for him and
do the right thing.
Yeah, and Charlie knew he wasn't going to win it, I think.
Was Leon his second chair, Jack Leon, up there? Do you remember?
I don't know if it was a second chair or not. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Jack was a good friend, too. Good guy.
So when you came back to San Antonio, you never really covered another case that Charlie tried in the Bexar County Courthouse? You just kind of knew him from
just kind of hung out with him.
Yeah. Do you remember much about the election when he ran against Barlow, and they all did him pretty dirty? Didn't the Express News kind of?
That happened before I got to know him.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Before. Okay.
Jim Barlow was an okay guy, but he was a straight-laced guy. We didn't hang out with people like Jim.
Yeah. And Ted Butler, after Barlow, you were pretty good buddies with him?
Oh, I knew who he was, and I didn't really know him that well.
Yeah. And can you tell something about Bill White?
I knew he was he was number one on Teresa's trick list.
Can you tell us a little bit about Bill White? That was the last of the old school DAs, wasn't it?
I didn't know White.
Oh, you didn't know him? I thought you might have had
no
from all the drinking days with Charlie Conway, stuff like that.
I remember Charlie Conway.
So let's talk. So as we wrap this up, I want to talk about the book and how it came about. So you wrote this book, or did you decide? How did this come about, the book?
I don't know. I always wanted to put it all together, and after I wrote the book, I realized I didn't put anything together. It's just a start.
It really is.
It's just there's so much that I feel like I just haven't even touched the edges of it with the book. But what I did basically was try to do the beginning and the end. The beginning was Junction, Texas, and San Marcos, and then San Antonio, and the end was I lost Grady. And
yeah, that is cool. That is kind of how I read that. The beginning is Junction, the end is the loss of your son.
Yeah.
And in between, there's 1,000 things more that you did that you'd like to cover in a number of books, probably.
Yeah, I've forgotten stuff, but we're just talking, and I start remembering T.P. Henley.
Yeah.
He was a character.
My dad said he was his favorite, too.
Yeah.
Or rubber shoes, sole lacy squeak walking down the courtroom.
Oh, yeah.
He said He said he'd take that eye out of his pocket and he'd hex the jury. He said,
Yeah, the evil eye.
Because he had a glass eye. Somebody said he took it out of his
No,
socket.
hell, he didn't. He'd take it out of his pocket. He
Oh.
wasn't. He had two good eyes, but he'd take that eye out of his pocket.
And they said one time he fired a gun off in a court.
Might have. I didn't hear about that.
Yeah. We'd like to have you back on, discuss some more stories. And
Yeah, and I want people to go to Amazon and get this book. And it's not, it kind of, some of these stories remind me of Hunter S. Thompson.
no, they do.
It's like it's kind of got a movie script feel to these chapters. I mean, when you're reading it, you don't really even
It's so
believe what
enjoyable.
you're reading. It's like you're thinking, is this bullshit or is this like real shit that went down?
Hunter Thompson was one of my influences.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
How about Damian Runyon?
Oh, that when I was a child, maybe,
Yeah.
but
So-
I started reading Hunter Thompson.
Yeah,
And,
it has that feel.
I remember he covered the presidential
72.
election. And
The
he gets
McGovern,
it-
yeah, he did.
he
Fear
gets-
and Loathing on the Campaign Trail.
Yeah, Fear and Loathing, and Las Vegas, wasn't it? Fear
Yeah,
and
Loathing Las
Fear and
Vegas.
There's
Loathing.
one on those two.
Yeah.
But when you read the book, every chapter just seems surreal, meaning it starts out one way, it takes twists, it has a lot of incredible turns, and each chapter, you can tell when reading it that really you're skipping so much of what went on.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying in one chapter, 60 to 73, and I'm like, could you imagine the stories that went down between those years? Meaning,
Yeah.
and you're reading it knowing that there's a lot more.
Right.
And that's the interesting thing where I do think you should do another book if you can, or elaborate on this one. Add to it because it's an incredible read. And
It really,
I'm going to
really
be,
is.
yeah.
There's nothing like it.
I'm
and it-
anxious to see if anybody's going to read it.
Oh, I think
you have
people are
to
going to
promote
read
it, Sam. We're going to help you. have to
But
promote
what
it.
I'm saying is people that start to read this book will not put it down because you started it brilliantly. The way it starts gets your attention, and the way it ends makes you feel.
That's what of the old newspaper in me. The 5 W's and the H. It's a when, why, where, who, how, and what,
Okay,
and how.
and it has all of that.
Yeah.
Well,
And you can tell there's big gaps that in a person that has lived like you have, there are huge gaps that could be filled in time.
Yes.
You know?
just the Eastwood, you don't.
Yeah, Eastwood's not in there. Like,
Not
but
even
I'm just,
in there, and you probably have 100 stories on Eastwood once
yeah.
you start thinking about them,
Uh,
Sam.
uh,
Or Sam Houston, the Burnt Orange, and all the affairs. You know,
but the characters are just incredible. I mean, the people that you surround, it reminds me so much of my dad. It reminds me so much of Chip. You know, when we grew up,
Yeah.
he kind of has that same thing. These characters coming into our household that I'm telling my mom, like, who the freaking hell is this guy?
Yeah.
And Chip would bring home these people that were just
that
characters.
was
you
an
know.
underbelly magnet.
Yeah, and they'd be hanging from our trees, or they'd be doing stuff, selling turquoise jewelry. And I'd go, Mom, why is this guy living in the 5th bedroom in our house? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell's going on? But my mom grew up with Charlie, my dad, and he grew up around my dad more. I didn't, but I realized that it's kind of like almost like a genetic thing. Certain people attract and want to be around, as you said, interesting people.
Who was Lane's brother? There was
Anthony Nicholas.
Anthony
Nicholas and Barrera.
Yeah, and I remember now.
Yeah, Anthony Nicholas was my uncle.
Okay, I was trying to.
And Peter Michael Curry was my uncle.
Okay.
And so we come from a kind of a legal family. But I want to say, in my book, you know, you're iconic and a treasure for all of the generations to read about. And it's funny, Sam, when you asked me, I don't know if anybody will read it. It's so weird because I'm in the young business here, where there's a lot of young people that come in here, and
That's what I'm wondering, if the young people are going to give a shit about
they will.
all that stuff we did in those days.
They will. And I'm telling you why. I'll mention a story here to a younger 17 to 19-year-old rock guitar player, and I'll mention personalities like my brother and people, and he's more mesmerized and interested. I bet these kids watching you talk than they would be watching anybody in their generation. You're going to be surprised at how many people of the younger generation really love these kinds of stories and books and things. We underestimate kind of their ability to want to learn a little bit about history.
Maybe.
And so I do think that I'm going to advocate that they read it and buy it. And we're going to do our best to help you promote it. But I'm going to have it all up on the screen so everybody can go to Amazon and order it. And then we're going to promote this episode differently than we would promote another episode, because you're selling a book. So most people come on and they're talking about their lives. They're not selling a book. So this is what makes your interview unique. So I want to thank you very much for coming and spending a Sunday with us.
Driving all the way in.
Driving all the way in and talking about, well, hold on, we'll talk about that later. And so I want to close with that and thank you so much for coming. And you're welcome to come and talk about anything that comes back to you at any time you text me. Chris, I want to go back. I forgot to talk about whatever.
Yeah, make some notes.
Because we can put them on what's called, what do they call those, Baylor? We're just called like other content pieces, whereby we take just that story of something you remember and we upload that story
alone,
separate from what we just did here.
Okay.
So specific.
So specific story that you have, we can take that story at any time you want and put it down so everyone can hear it. And when people ask me why I do this, it's because I want people to hear your story. And so what if they don't go get the book? So now they have a YouTube forever. It will be up forever.
But we need to add to it.
We add to it generations to go watch.
I don't understand how YouTube works.
It'll be on there forever.
I know I've got my wife here with me, and without her,
You've told me before.
I couldn't make it.
Yeah. I know. Neither could I without mine.
She's proofread every word of that book.
There you go.
Backward and forward. She's an excellent proofreader. There's not very many people that can do that. I
agree. And so if those stories ever come to you and you want to talk about them, either of you can reach out to me. But I want you to know that the book is incredible and it's something you should be very proud of.
It's a page turn. You can't put it down.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
I'm telling you, I sat there with the whole damn thing. I didn't take a single break.
I want to ask my brother one question. Seriously, and I don't care if it's yesterday, when's the last time you ever read a whole book in one sitting?
Oh, my God. They joke at my family. My family jokes with me all the time. My son, my daughter, you don't read anything. You don't read any books.
Pages and puts it away. I've given him books on Aerosmith. I've given him books on
I look at 3
David
pages.
Lee Roth.
I sat there. I got the book 7 o'clock last night. I read the entire thing.
It's not a long book.
It doesn't matter, though.
He's a 1 or 2, 3 page reader.
Yeah, I'm a 1 or 2, 3 page reader. I'm done.
I brought him books on bands he liked, people he really looked up to, David Lee Roth, Jim Morrison, Crystal Reed, Dylan's son, 2 or 3 pages, and he put it on. I said, "You got to be kidding me." Yeah. I found that book. He read your whole book.
Yeah,
I figured he did, but I wanted to ask him.
I read the whole book, took my notes, and and the funny thing was, I covered a 100th of what I wanted to in this. Yeah. Like there's some stories in here.
Offshoots.
The offshoots of the paragraph that are just unreal.
You could get deeper.
I could get deeper in each topic. But what I'm saying is you are a must-have on the show because of the importance of what your contributions are.
You keep blowing the smoke up my ass, I might write another book.
Yeah, well, you should.
No, Sam, we're being serious.
No, I'm not blowing no smoke up your ass.
We didn't talk yet about, and maybe it's
we haven't spoke.
No, we didn't prep for this at all. I wouldn't even, if it wasn't you, I wouldn't have made it. And Chris said, you ought to come. So I came on and got here about 10 minutes for you and Sharon. And I wasn't going to, this is no smoke.
You know, I've been closer to you than I have to Chris.
Sure. Oh, hell yeah.
We talked all the time and, did some bit. But we still have to, Chris may want my brother finish what he's doing, but I want to ask you, we never covered Augie. We never covered Hondo Crouch. So we may want, if you want to do it next time.
No, let's cover Augie. So let's talk about your relationship with Augie Myers. Let's go into that a little bit. When you first met him, how it went down, the closeness you have to him.
I just got the magazine going, and I was hanging out at a place in Beauberty called Spec Store. And it turns out Augie Myers was living in a farmhouse right across the Dry Creek. and that's where I met Augie. And he's an incredible musician. He's an incredible person. And Augie's probably my best friend right now today. We've stayed close since that day, since that first meeting. But Augie's, he's had a handicap. He's had polio, and he's got that crippled leg that he has to deal with. But I've been with Augie from the beginning. When he got his divorce, that was a hard time for him, like it is for a lot of people. But he stayed true to his music and to his friends. And if you want somebody to talk to, give you an honest answer, it's Augie Myers. Anyway, Augie's for real. All of the phonies that you run into out here in this entertainment world, and all the bullshit that you listen to, and all the people that you wonder about, and the people that you want to be like, and the people that you damn sure don't want to be like. There's just a very few of them that shine, and Augie's one of them. Everybody loves Augie Myers. And that's the truth because of his personality. But he's an honest person. There's just not that many honest people around. He's my friend, and I watch us both getting older. Augie's back on a cane again. He has a bad leg, and I'm fading out too, and just I can remember when Doug Somm was still alive. I remember going to Doug's funeral, and the Sir Douglas Quintet. That was San Antonio. That's the kind of music that San Antonio is famous for.
Let's talk about it. So Augie in the old days, how are you introduced to him on the musical front? Meaning you see him in that first band he was in?
Oh yeah, Sir Douglas Quintet.
And so you kind of get into, you like them.
Oh yeah.
And then you start.
Well, actually, when I first met Augie, the quintet had broken up, and I think I may have seen them one time, but that was the time that they left San Antonio in disgrace, supposedly, because Doug had gotten busted with marijuana and all that stuff, and so they pulled out of San Antonio, and Augie came back.
And what was their hit? So people that they had a few hits, didn't they?
Well, the Sir Douglas Quintet was the biggest one they had was "She's About a Mover,"
and that's a great song, and it was a huge song.
And Rain, 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 Rain. Yep. And oh man, I can't
just think about it. They're from here, and they've got a hit on radio.
Yeah,
they got a hit on the radio.
So when you met him and went across to the farmhouse, did you start going watching him play?
Yeah, we became friends, and these musicians were coming through San Antonio, and every one of them knew Augie and Doug, and they would go out to the farmhouse. The first time I saw Leon Russell, he was sitting on a set of rusty bed springs out there feeding breadcrumbs to a chicken, and that's Leon Russell, yeah. But Spanky McFarland, she was big back in those days, and they were all dropping in. Kinky Friedman, and Kinky's a good friend of mine. Kinky is having trouble right now with Parkinson's, but his sister says he's trying to put another record together. But Kinky became a friend of mine too back in those days, and on the Kexel days too. I ain't a racist, but Aristotle Onassis is one Greek we don't need.
So, who was your favorite of all of them? Probably Augie, right?
Augie's my favorite.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you saw him play a lot. Did you ever travel with Augie when they went out on the road?
No, just around here.
He's played all over the world, correct?
He's played in New York and everywhere, but
I
just know him from here.
And he's worldwide.
Augie will call me sometimes and say, just checking out to see how you doing. And another one that does that is Jimmy Spacek. Mm-hmm. Jimmy will call me up just out of the blue. Doesn't want anything or not asking for anything, but he's younger than me, but I've got a relationship with a lot of San Antonio musicians through the years.
I was thinking we ought to have Sam back on and give him and Sharon the list in advance of bands, and then we can ask him about each band. You could tell us a personality, a story.
That's
that
right.
Might be a good follow-up to help you promote.
Absolutely. I wanted to make sure we covered Augie and that was good of Chip to bring that up because I'd forgot about that and it was in my notes. But
Hondo too. You want to
yeah,
talk about relationship with Luckenbach.
Yeah.
When you first went out there, first heard it.
Hondo Crouch and I were friends. I remember the morning that Hondo died. Tech Schofield called and told me Hondo was gone. I didn't believe it at first. But
when did you first meet Hondo, Sam?
Right shortly after I got the magazine going, must have been 70-something, 76, 77. But I went out to Luckenbach. Somebody told me you need to go meet Hondo Crouch. And I went out there drinking beer one day. And so Jerry Jeff Walker was real close to Hondo. And I couldn't stand Jerry Jeff, but we were around each other for a lot. And it was a Luckenbach store where I met Spanky. I mean, anyway, the British Broadcasting Company sent a crew to Luckenbach, and they were going to do a story on Luckenbach that was going to appear in London. And that morning, Hondo called me. He wanted me out there, and they were going to tell stories, and they were going to play the guitar, and they were going to sing, and they were going to do all this, hip country stuff. But Jerry Jeff was out there that day, and then Rusty Cox was out there, and Hondo, and anyway, Jerry Jeff didn't want to do it. The woman that was with us, BBC woman, her name was Bertie, and she wanted us to tell stories and do quaint things and show the people in England what Texas was all about. And Jerry Jeff didn't want to do it. He was all screwed up. And Ace Reed was the cartoonist. And Ace showed up drunk, fell out of his damn truck. Somebody was driving him, and whiskey bottles fell out on the damn ground and shit. And I'll never forget that stuff. It was horrible. And Hondo was ready for him. Jerry Jeff was saying, "Oh man, we ain't actors, Just don't bring a script in here and ask us to do this." And the whole thing just degenerated. It was horrible. And finally, this little old lady from BBC walked up, and there was a Spanish moss hanging from this oak tree, and she said, "What's that?" And old Ace talked, the way Ace talked, he said, "That there's Spanish moss, lady." And she said, "Well, what is it for?" And Ace said, "Well, them Comanche Indian squaws was ministrating. Well, they poked it up there, what, and goddamn, that ended that. And I looked around, and those British broadcasting guys were packing cameras up, and they couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Is that true, really?
It's true.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Hondo said, "Oh, goddamn, Ace, I can't believe you did this." Everybody's BBC, but they're packing their van and getting the hell out of there. Walker said, "Oh, let's go snort some coke and have a beer or some shit." I don't remember. Hondo was just broken heart. He wanted Luckenbach to be on British broadcast.
God, that would have been incredible.
Did you?
Walker said, "You want to be a star in BBC? Shit."
God, what a limited-minded thinker. I mean, hell, you have that opportunity. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that blew up at that point, right? The whole thing blew up.
Yeah, when Ace said, "Well, them Comanche squaws," and that was it. And Hondo was about to cry. I felt so bad for Hondo. I felt like crying too.
Did you see some good shows out there? In Luckenbach, see some good entertainment come through there?
Not really, just hanging out there. Oh, they had some musicians appear in the old dance hall out there, and they still do,
Yeah.
Johnny Bush is about my next best friend.
And you just lost him.
Yep.
That was tough. I saw him play in Yorktown about 3 years ago at the Western Days.
Yeah.
On a Sunday afternoon, we stayed. It was the third weekend in October, 3, 4, and his voice sounded a little rough. Was there some problems in the end with his voice, or was that just that one day?
Well, he completely lost his voice,
In the end, he did?
No, way back.
That's what I'd heard, and I guess he was regaining
and
it.
he regained some of it, but not all of it.
That's what it must have been then.
But he could go as high as anybody in the world could go, and it was just like breathing to him. It was easy. But he was, Gary Stewart was one of my best friends too, and he's dead now. He killed himself. He was the king of the drinking songs. He and Bush. Jerry did songs like this. I got this drinking thing, and Bush too, like Jim, Jack, and Rose. Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, and Sweet Gypsy Rose, the only friends I have. And
now, were they both songwriters and performers?
Both songwriters and performers.
Can you tell us a little about Johnny Bush's life and how you met him and what he was
Bush,
like?
Bush was. I met him back there when I first started Action Magazine too. We became friends, and he was playing in joints around San Antonio too. And Johnny got big for a while. Actually, Johnny started out with Willie. He was a drummer, and
he was.
Yeah, Darryl McCall was a bass player, and they all worked for Ray Price back in time. And Willie was playing the lead guitar, and then they all broke away from Price, and every one of them became stars in their own right, just about.
And he lost his voice. And you said they got some Botox injections.
Yeah, that got him going again.
I've heard about this.
Yeah,
and they injected in your throat, like into
his vocal cords.
Good God! And it works. Kind of.
Something. Let's see. It's dysphonia. Is the name of it? Something dysphonia.
Yeah, I remember I read that.
Yeah. So he never got that high voice back that he got started with, but he got enough of it back to keep going. And
did he pen the song "Whiskey River"?
Yeah, he wrote that song. And
that was Willie.
Of course, he and Willie are best friends. So he'd take a song to Willie and what he thinks. It's only got one verse, and we'll just repeat it. Whiskey River, don't run dry. You're all I got. Take care of me. Whiskey River. Yeah. And so then Willie took the damn thing and put a double beat to it and recorded it himself. And then Johnny wrote a song, said, Willie, don't stop singing Whiskey River. It's the only thing that's keeping me alive.
Did he really write that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So Johnny and I and Sharon went to Christmas Eve at Trinity Baptist Church, a few years ago. And Johnny got with Buckner Fanning when he was pastor of Trinity Baptist Church, and that's when Johnny turned himself into Christianity.
What year was that? A few years ago?
Boy, that's been a number of years ago.
Yeah, Buckner's been gone 10,
That's
15
when Johnny was trying to get his voice back, and he went to see Buckner, and became not one of those phony Christians or anything like that, but Johnny believed in God, believed in Jesus Christ, and he didn't go around preaching to people, but that's how he got back going again.
He played a lot of gigs, didn't he, Johnny?
He did.
Did you ever travel to see him out of the city?
Oh, I'd go see him. No, here I'd go out. When he played here or around here, I don't remember.
So he made his living playing. Basically, that was his living.
Johnny's 100%.
Off of live gigs.
Yeah.
Well, he had the royalties from the song.
Well, yeah.
Depending on what he got.
He's got records out, too.
Okay.
But Willie recorded Whiskey River.
Right.
And Johnny made enough off of that, just his royalties.
Yeah.
That's when he wrote the song, Don't Quit Singing Whiskey River. It's the only thing that's keeping me alive.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, before we disband Floor's Country Store, did you ever know Mr. Floor? Did you ever know John T. himself?
John T. was my all-time favorite. I had the run of Floors when John T. was alive. I could do any damn thing I wanted to do at Floors.
Really?
He really liked me, yeah.
That's your Express News when you first met him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you started Action, he about right then sold it to Aganisi.
I started Action after I'd been fired.
I know, but I'm saying when Action was started, that's about when Mr. Floor sold the store to the second owner. About 75 is when he sold it, Mr. Aganisi.
I guess so, yeah.
So you knew him when you were at the Express News a lot, running around there.
See,
He just took a liking to you? Or?
Willie was living over there at Bandera for a while, and he would come in and play Floors, and that's how he was staying alive.
What was Mr. Floors like? Just a character? Was he?
He was just a good old guy, I thought. Yeah. He loved the music. But I didn't know him all that well.
So Willie was basically, to stay alive, was living in Bandera and playing Flores Country Store.
For a short time, Willie moved over to Bandera. He thought he was going to move over there, and the people around Bandera didn't like his kids with their long hair and all that stuff. So he said, "Fuck this," and he went on to, excuse my language.
Okay.
He went on to Austin, and that's when he found a place in Austin, and he would always come back and play Flores. That's
always.
That was his bread and butter.
Well, they still have a hand-painted sign out there, Sam. I know you know this. Willie Nelson every Friday night.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Floor put him on regularly.
Right. He played
He believed in him, didn't he?
And Willie had a bad habit of gambling and losing all of his money. And when he needed money, he'd run to John T. John T. would pump him back up and keep him playing out there. I think Nelson finally got over the gambling disease.
Was it cards or sports wagering or
card playing?
Card playing.
Card playing.
That's what it was.
So he'd lose. He'd make money, then Willie would lose the money.
Yeah.
And he lived in Bandera. Then he moved to Austin. And does he still live there?
Still's got the place in Austin. Then he bought the ranch up there.
Got it.
We called it Luck. That's where we went the day that I did the cover story on Willie for Texas Girl magazine. That's another story.
Yeah,
it went broke, but it was a good idea. So we had naked women running all over that hill up there that day.
Yeah, we'll have to cover that next time.
And so,
but one last thing about Flores. I'm sorry, about Junction, Texas. You told a story one time about a group of boys that threw the school bus. They were your friends and they were young, and they threw a school bus driver off the bus. The Jinsky boys or something?
Oh yeah, that was
is
a bunch
true,
of.
Or is that
that was a story that I'd heard about the Teacup Mountain people.
Yeah,
that was a community out there, and they were bad news. They threw the bus driver off. That was just a story that I'd heard.
Oh, I thought you were on the bus. Okay.
Oh.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad we covered the Flores Country Store. But thank you very much for coming on.
It's been my pleasure.